For 42 years, I've carried a secret that cost me my marriage, my career, and very nearly my sanity. I am 67 years old. I have stage 4 lung cancer, non-small cell, metastasized to my liver and spine. The oncologist at Sacred Heart Medical Center gave me 6 months back in July. It's December now. I can feel the timeline shortening. My name is Robert William Thorne. I live alone in a 1-bedroom apartment in Spokane, Washington, on East Sprague Avenue, above a pawn shop that sells pre-owned hunting rifles. My daughter hasn't spoken to me in 11 years. My ex-wife sends a Christmas card every few years with no return address, just her maiden name signed at the bottom. I have no friends. I have no religion. I have no reason left to keep quiet. In March of 1983, I watched 2 FBI agents interrogate a Sasquatch in a concrete room 4 levels beneath Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center in Virginia. What it told them, what it wrote, in clear, deliberate English, made Special Agent Thomas Carver vomit into a trash can. 3 weeks later, Agent Carver put his service weapon in his mouth in a Motel 6 outside Bethesda. I read about it in the Washington Post. They called it exhaustion and depression. They were half right. That's the secret. That's what I'm dying with. But to understand how I got into that room, you need to understand who I was before. You need to understand the texture of normal life, because that's what made everything after feel like falling through ice. In March of 1983, I was 25 years old, and I thought I had my whole life figured out. I'd been a wildlife management officer with the U.S. Forest Service for 3 years. Olympic National Forest District, stationed out of the ranger cabin near Graves Creek. Badge number 2847, issued in 1980. I remember the weight of it on my belt, that solid brass and nickel weight that made me feel legitimate. Official. My territory covered roughly 14,000 acres of temperate rainforest, Douglas fir, western hemlock, Sitka spruce so tall they disappeared into fog. I was responsible for monitoring elk populations, preventing poaching, tracking tagged black bears, and filing reports that I suspect no one in Washington, D.C. ever read. My government salary was $17,400 a year. My ranger cabin, Forest Service property, 12 miles from the nearest paved road, was free. I drove a government-issued 1981 Chevrolet K20, forest green with a white Forest Service shield on the doors, license plate USFS 412. It had 48,000 miles on it when they assigned it to me. The bench seat was cracked vinyl that stuck to your legs in summer. It smelled like gun oil, old coffee, and the pine tree air freshener I kept hanging from the rearview mirror because the heater core leaked coolant and the sweetness covered the smell. I had a Motorola 2-way radio mounted under the dash. Call sign, Keynote 7. Most days, it just crackled with static. I was married. Her name was Linda. We'd met in 1979 at a barn dance in Forks. She was a waitress at the Timber Room restaurant, and she had blonde hair she wore in a braid down her back. We got married in June of 1980 at the Lutheran Church in Amanda Park. Small ceremony. Her family, my mom, about 30 friends. We honeymooned at Calalock Beach. I remember we stayed at the lodge and ate salmon every night and watched the sunset turn the Pacific Ocean the color of rust. She lived in our house in Forks, a rental, 2 bedrooms, $285 a month, while I spent most of the week at the cabin for work. I'd drive the hour and a half home every Friday night, and we'd have the weekends. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. She wanted kids. We were trying. Life was small and predictable and good. The first week of March 1983 felt like every other early spring in the Olympics. Rain, mostly, not the dramatic downpours you see in movies, just a constant, gray drizzle that soaked into everything. The kind of rain that makes the moss glow electric green and turns the dirt roads into chocolate pudding. I wore the same thing every day. Levi's 501s, a green Forest Service work shirt with my name embroidered above the pocket, a Carhartt jacket that was so soaked with lanolin and rain it had gone stiff, and Red Wing loggers boots that I'd waterproofed with mink oil every Sunday. I kept my Winchester Model 70-36 in a rack behind the seat of the truck. Box of shells in the glove box. Maglite flashlight, 4D batteries, heavy as a pipe. Leather gloves, topographic maps in a Ziploc bag. A thermos of Folgers coffee that Linda made for me every Monday. Black, 2 sugars. Mornings started at 5:30 a.m. I'd wake to the sound of rain on the cabin's tin roof, that steady tick-tick-tick that made you want to stay in bed forever. I'd start the propane heater, boil water on the camp stove for instant oatmeal. Quaker oats, maple flavor. I'd eat standing at the window, looking out at the tree line. The forest started about 15 feet from my porch. No gradual transition. Just cabin, then trees, then darkness. The radio was my companion. I had a Sony portable AM/FM that ran on 6C batteries. In the mornings, I'd get the news out of Seattle. Kiro 710. Reagan was president. The Cold War was still cold. Everyone was arguing about his strategic defense initiative. Reporters were calling it Star Wars. There was talk about the Russians and nuclear missiles and whether we'd all be ash by summer. Linda worried about it. I told her we lived too far from anything strategic to matter. The music that winter was Billie Jean by Michael Jackson. You couldn't escape it. Every station, every hour. I remember driving to check elk traps on March 8th and hearing it twice on the same station in a 4-hour span. There was also Africa by Toto, Shame on the Moon by Bob Seger, Baby Come to Me by Patty Austin and James Ingalls. Songs that felt warm and safe and forgettable. On March 2nd, the final episode of MASH aired. I didn't have a TV at the cabin, but Linda called me on the 2-way radio. She'd figured out how to patch through on the emergency frequency and told me about it. She said she cried, said half of America cried. I told her I'd watch the rerun with her when I got home. I never did. My days had a rhythm. I'd spend mornings hiking transects through my zone, looking for signs of poaching, gut piles, spent shells, snare wire. I'd check the fish traps in Graves Creek for salmon counts. I'd photograph track marks in the mud with my Kodak Instamatic camera and file them in reports. Tuesdays, I'd drive to the ranger station in Quinault to drop off paperwork and pick up supplies. I'd buy a sandwich at the general store, turkey and Swiss, lettuce, mayo on white bread, and eat it in the truck listening to Paul Harvey on the radio. Afternoons were for radio checks. I'd call into District HQ at 1400 hours, report my position and status. Quinault 7, all clear, no incidents. Then I'd spend the rest of the day doing maintenance, clearing blowdowns from access roads with a chainsaw, replacing trail markers, inventorying equipment. The cabin was 12 by 16 feet, plywood walls painted white, single window facing east, wood stove in the corner. I had a cot with a wool blanket, a folding table, 2 chairs, a Coleman lantern that hissed when you pumped it. My food was canned, Hormel chili, Campbell's soup, Van Camp's pork and beans. I had a cooler I kept stocked with a block of ice from the ranger station, bologna, cheese, butter, eggs. I'd fry eggs on the wood stove in the mornings in a cast-iron skillet so old it was smooth as glass. I read a lot. Paperback westerns mostly, Louis L'Amour, Zane Grey. I'd buy them at the Goodwill in Forks for $1 each. At night, I'd sit at the table with the lantern hissing and read until my eyes hurt, and then I'd blow it out and lie in the dark listening to the rain in the forest. The forest was loud at night. People think of woods as quiet, but they're not. Branches creaking, things moving through underbrush, owls, coyotes, the occasional scream of a cougar that sounded like a woman being murdered. Wind through the canopy made a sound like the ocean. I got used to it. It became white noise. Until March 3rd. March 3rd, 1983, was a Thursday. I remember because Linda had called the day before on the radio and reminded me that Friday was her birthday. She'd be 24. She wanted me to come home a day early, take her to dinner at the timber room where we'd met, I said I would. I promised. That night, I went to bed at 2100 hours, 9 p.m. I read 3 chapters of Hondo by Louis L'Amour. I blew out the lantern. I lay in the dark, listening to the rain, which had picked up into something heavier. I could hear it drumming on the roof, running through the gutters, dripping off the eaves. I fell asleep thinking about what to get Linda for her birthday. I was thinking maybe a necklace from the jewelry store in Forks. Something silver. At 2:47 a.m. I woke to the sound of breathing. Not my breathing. Something outside. And the smell, God, the smell, like wet dog and rotted cedar and something else. Something sharp and medicinal, like the hallway of a hospital, like copper and iodine and infection. That's when everything normal ended. That's when my life split into before and after, and I've been living in the after ever since. At 2:47 a.m. on March 3rd, 1983, I woke to the sound of breathing outside my cabin window. I know the exact time because I opened my eyes and the first thing I saw was my Timex watch on the folding table beside the cot, the hands glowing green in the dark. 2:47. I remember thinking, in that half-asleep fog, that I needed to piss. That's what woke me. Just a full bladder and the rain and the breathing. Not wind, not branches. Breathing. Slow, controlled, rhythmic. The sound of lungs filling and emptying, deliberate and deep, like someone had just finished running and was trying to catch their breath without making noise. I could hear it through the plywood wall, maybe 6 feet from where I was lying. My first thought, still fuzzy with sleep, bear. We had black bears in the territory. They'd get into the trash sometimes, knock over the metal. Ken I kept bungeed shut 20 feet from the cabin. But bears don't breathe like that. Bears huff and snort and make these wet chuffing sounds. This was different. This was measured. This was controlled. Then the smell hit me. It came through the gap under the door, through the cracks around the window frame, seeping into the cabin like something alive. I'd been smelling the Olympics for 3 years. Wet earth, rotting logs, sword ferns, that green, fertile smell of things growing and decomposing at the same time. This wasn't that. This was musk. Animal musk, thick and oily, like a wet dog that had rolled in something dead, but underneath it, decay. Rotted wood, fungus, the black smell of standing water in old stumps. And then, cutting through everything else, something that made my hindbrain scream. A sharp, medicinal smell. Antiseptic. Copper. The smell of a hospital hallway, that chemical iodine smell mixed with something organic and wrong. Blood. Old blood. Infected tissue. I was fully awake now. My heart kicked into a different rhythm. Not the slow thud of sleep. This was rapid, hard, the kind of heartbeat you can feel in your throat and behind your eyes. My body went rigid on the cot, every muscle locked. I wasn't breathing. I realized I was holding my breath, like a child hiding under the covers, like somehow not breathing would make me invisible. The breathing outside continued. In, out, patient, waiting. I forced myself to inhale through my nose. The smell was overwhelming. My eyes watered. I could taste it on the back of my tongue, that copper rot taste that makes you want to gag. Move, I told myself. Do something. But I couldn't. This is what they don't tell you about. Fear. Real fear. The kind that's wired into your DNA from a million years of being prey. It doesn't make you fight or flee. It makes you freeze. Every action movie thing I'd ever seen, every fantasy I'd had about being cool under pressure, evaporated. I was 25 years old, 6'2", 190 pounds, trained in wilderness survival, armed, and I was lying on a cot in the dark, too terrified to move because something was breathing outside my window. My heart was hammering now. I could feel the pulse in my neck, in my wrists, behind my knees. My hands were shaking. I'd curled them into fists without realizing it, nails digging into my palms. Sweat was collecting in my armpits, in the small of my back, cold and clammy against the cotton of my long underwear. The breathing stopped. The silence was worse. I strained to hear anything. The rain had softened to a drizzle, that constant tick-tick-tick on the tin roof. Water dripping from the eaves, a branch creaking somewhere in the darkness, but no breathing, no movement. "It knows you're awake," something in my mind whispered. "It heard you move." I'd shifted on the cot, just slightly, just a small adjustment of weight, and the old springs had creaked, a tiny sound, but in that silence, it had been a gunshot. My eyes had adjusted enough to make out shapes in the cabin. The darker rectangle of the door, the gray square of the window, the bulk of the wood stove, the table, and on the table, my maglite. 4 D batteries, heavy as a club, bright enough to blind. Next to it, my leather gloves, my truck keys. Behind me, mounted on pegs on the wall, my Winchester. I had to move. I had to get the gun. Every second I stayed frozen was a second something else was making decisions for me. I sat up slowly. The cot springs creaked again, a long, rusty squeal that sounded like a scream in the silence. I stopped, waited, listened. Nothing. I swung my legs off the cot. My feet touched the cold plywood floor. I was wearing white wool socks. I stood, keeping my weight balanced, trying not to make the floor creak. 3 steps to the table. I reached out in the dark, fingers finding the cold aluminum barrel of the maglite. I picked it up. The weight was reassuring. Real. Solid. 2 more steps to the wall. My fingers found the Winchester's stock. I lifted it off the pegs, slow and careful. The metal was cold. I worked the bolt by feel, checking the chamber. Empty. Of course it was empty. I kept it unloaded in the cabin. Safety protocol. The shells were in a cardboard box on the shelf above the window. I'd have to load it. I'd have to make noise. I stood there in the dark, holding the rifle in one hand and the maglite in the other, and I made a decision. I couldn't stay inside. Whatever was out there knew exactly where I was. I was trapped. The cabin had 1 door, 1 window. If something wanted in, all it had to do was wait for me to open that door in the morning. I needed to know what I was dealing with. I moved to the window. It was a single-pane piece of glass, maybe 2 feet by 3 feet, with a simple latch. I'd covered it with a piece of canvas at night for insulation. Now, standing to the side, I reached up and slowly peeled back the corner of the canvas. Just an inch, just enough to see out. Darkness. Trees, the shape of my truck 20 feet away, a darker shadow against the forest. I waited. My breath was fogging the glass. I wiped it with my sleeve. Then I saw it move. Not in front of me. Off to the right, near the equipment shed, a small wooden structure where I kept the chainsaw, extra fuel, tools. Something large shifted position, rising from a crouch into a standing position, and the scale of it made my knees go weak. 9 feet tall, maybe more. Broad across the shoulders in a way that didn't look natural, didn't look possible. Covered in fur, I could see it clearly now, my eyes fully adjusted, rust-colored, shaggy, catching what little ambient light filtered through the clouds. It was hunched forward, arms long, hanging past its knees. But it wasn't attacking. It wasn't charging. It wasn't even moving toward the cabin. It was examining something. My radio antenna. I had a CB radio antenna mounted on a pole next to the shed. 8 feet tall, wire and aluminum. Nothing special. The creature was standing next to it, and I watched as it reached up with 1 arm, 1 hand, and touched the antenna with what looked like fingers. Long fingers. Not claws. Not paws. Fingers that moved independently, deliberately, like it was feeling the texture of the metal. My brain was stuttering, trying to process what I was seeing. Bears don't do that. Cougars don't do that. Elk, deer, coyotes, nothing in this forest stood 9 feet tall and examined radio equipment with curiosity. I raised the maglite, my thumb finding the button. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip it with both hands, rifle forgotten, leaning against the wall. I pressed the button. The beam cut through the darkness like a white spear, 40 feet of halogen brightness, and it caught the creature full on. It turned its head toward me. I saw its face. I've spent 42 years trying to find the words for what I saw in that moment. I've failed every time. It wasn't human, but it wasn't animal either. It was something in between, something that didn't fit into any category my brain had a file for. The face was broad and flat, covered in rust-red fur that was lighter around the mouth and eyes. The nose was wide, almost pushed in, like a gorilla's, but not quite. The mouth was closed, lips pressed together in what looked like concentration, concern. But the eyes. God, the eyes. They reflected green in my flashlight beam, that same eye shine you see in deer at night, that unnatural glow. But the shape was wrong. They weren't on the sides of the head like a deer. They were forward-facing, predator eyes, human eyes, large, maybe twice the size of a human's, set deep under a heavy brow, ridge. And they were looking directly at me, not past me, not through me, at me, with awareness, with intelligence. We stared at each other. I don't know how long. My sense of time had collapsed. It could have been 3 seconds. It could have been a minute. My heart was jackhammering so hard I thought I was having a heart attack. My vision was tunneling at the edges. The maglite was shaking in my hands, making the beam wobble. The creature didn't snarl, didn't bare its teeth, didn't beat its chest or roar, or do any of the aggressive displays I'd been trained to recognize. It just looked at me, and the expression on its face, if you could call it an expression, was something I didn't expect. Sadness. It looked sad, then it did something that made me drop the maglite. It raised one hand, slowly, deliberately, palm out, and placed it over its chest, over where a human heart would be. It held it there for a moment, pressing down, like it was checking its own pulse, or showing me it had one. Then it lowered its hand, turned, and walked away. Not ran, not crashed through the underbrush. Walked, upright, steady, moving between the trees with a grace that seemed impossible for something that size. Within seconds, it had disappeared into the darkness. No sound, no broken branches, just gone. The maglite rolled on the floor where I'd dropped it, beam pointing at the ceiling. I stood at the window, hands pressed against the glass, breathing so fast I was hyperventilating. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. "Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ." My legs gave out. I sat down hard on the floor, back against the wall, rifle clattering beside me. I was shaking violently. My teeth were chattering. I wrapped my arms around my knees and tried to breathe, tried to think, tried to make sense of what I'd just seen. Sasquatch. Bigfoot. You just saw a fucking Bigfoot. But that wasn't right. That wasn't the right word for what I'd seen. Those were cartoon words, joke words, words for grainy photos and hoaxes and late-night radio shows. What I'd seen was real. It had weight and smell and presence. It had moved with purpose. It had looked at me with understanding. I sat there until my breathing slowed, until the shaking subsided to a tremor, until I could think clearly enough to stand up and retrieve the maglite. I spent the next hour checking every corner of the cabin, looking under the cot, behind the stove. I loaded the Winchester with 5 shells and kept it across my lap while I sat at the table, lantern lit, watching the window. Nothing happened. At 4:30 a.m., with dawn still an hour away, I finally worked up the courage to open the door. The smell was still there, fainter now, but unmistakable. I swept the maglite beam across the clearing. Nothing. I walked to the equipment shed, rifle raised, finger on the safety. The antenna was untouched. No damage, no bent metal, but on my porch rail, the wooden railing that ran along the front of the cabin, waist high, weathered gray. Something had been placed. A bundle of deer jerky. I'd hung it 3 days ago in a tree near the creek, curing it in the cold air. Venison strips, salted, wrapped in cheesecloth, about 2 pounds of meat. Something had taken it. I'd noticed it missing yesterday and assumed crows or ravens. Now it was back, laid carefully on the porch rail, not torn open, not eaten, returned. I picked it up with shaking hands. The cheesecloth was damp but intact. The meat was still good. I stood there on my porch in the pre-dawn darkness, holding a bundle of jerky, and I understood what had happened. It had taken something from me, and now it was giving it back. Not an animal behavior, not a bear stealing food and then deciding it didn't want it. This was intent. This was communication. This was an apology. I went back inside, locked the door, sat at the table with the jerky in front of me and the rifle across my lap, and waited for sunrise. When the sky finally turned gray and the forest became visible again, I made a pot of coffee on the camp stove. My hands were steady enough to hold the cup. I drank it black, staring at the bundle of meat, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it, but I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. Something was out there. Something that walked upright and had hands and understood property and theft and restitution. Something that had looked at me with sadness in its eyes. I didn't report it. I didn't call it in on the radio. I didn't tell Linda when I called her later that morning to say I'd be home Friday night for her birthday like I promised. Because how do you report something like that? How do you put it in a log? 247 hours, observed unknown bipedal creature examining radio antenna. Creature returned stolen food. No aggressive behavior. Creature appeared sad. They'd think I was insane. They'd pull me off duty for psych eval. They'd take my badge. So I said nothing. I spent that day trying to work, checking traps, cutting fallen trees off the access road, doing all the normal things, but every time I looked at the tree line, I wondered if it was watching me. And every time the wind shifted and I caught a whiff of that smell, musk and decay and copper, my heart would start hammering again. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the table with the lantern burning and the rifle loaded and the door locked, listening to every sound, jumping at every creak. But nothing came. It would be 7 more days before I saw it again, and when I did, everything would change. For 7 days, I lived in a state of heightened awareness that made every moment feel like walking on glass. I worked my routes, I checked my traps, I filed my reports, but I was never fully present. Part of my brain was always listening, always scanning the tree line, always waiting for that smell to come drifting through the forest again. Linda noticed something was wrong when I came home that Friday for her birthday. She asked me twice during dinner if I was feeling okay. I told her I was just tired. She gave me a silver bracelet I couldn't afford, and I gave her a necklace from the jewelry store in Forks, a small silver chain with a heart pendant. We ate chocolate cake. We made love that night in our bedroom with the window open and the sound of rain on the roof, and the whole time I was thinking about those eyes reflecting green in my flashlight beam. I didn't tell her. How could I? I went back to the cabin Sunday night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Nothing. The forest was just the forest again, rain and moss and the smell of Douglas fir. I started to wonder if I'd had some kind of episode. Stress hallucination, carbon monoxide from the wood stove. My mind manufacturing something impossible because the isolation was getting to me. But the jerky was still there on my table, wrapped in cheesecloth. Physical proof. I kept touching it like a talisman, reminding myself it had happened. Thursday, March 10th, I had a morning route that took me up the Graves Creek Trail. 6 miles of muddy path that followed the creek bed up into old growth territory. I was checking for elk sign, documenting a population study the district office wanted for their quarterly report. Routine work, boring work, the kind that lets your mind wander. It was 10:47 a.m. when I smelled it again. I froze mid-step, one boot lifted, and just breathed. There it was, cutting through the clean rain smell of the forest. Musk, decay, and underneath it all, that sharp hospital smell, but this time it was stronger, more concentrated, the copper smell of blood, fresh and old, and something else, something that made my stomach turn. Rot. Infection. Gangrene. I'd smelled infected wounds before. You don't work in the back country without learning what sepsis smells like. This was that smell amplified, mixed with something organic and wild. It was the smell of tissue dying, of a body trying and failing to fight off an invasion. Something was hurt. Badly. I unslung my Winchester from my shoulder and worked the bolt, chambering around. My heart was pounding again, but this time it was different. This wasn't the paralytic fear of the unknown. This was adrenaline with purpose. Something in these woods needed help, and every molecule of my training said I should find it. I followed the smell. It led me off trail, through a section of old growth where the trees were so thick the canopy blocked out most of the gray morning light. Sword ferns tall as my chest, nurse logs covered in moss, decomposing into the earth. The ground was soft, almost spongy with centuries of rot and growth. The smell got stronger. I was breathing through my mouth now, but I could still taste it on the back of my tongue, that sweet, sick taste of infection. Then I heard it, breathing, labored, wet. The sound of lungs working too hard. I came around a massive western red cedar, maybe 12 feet in diameter, bark red and fibrous, and I saw it collapsed against the trunk, the creature from my cabin. I knew it was the same one. Same rust-colored fur, same massive frame. But now it was crumpled at the base of the tree, sitting with its back against the bark, legs splayed out in front of it. Its left arm was pressed against its left shoulder, hand clamped over a wound I couldn't see yet. It was hurt, not just hurt, dying. I stopped 20 feet away, rifle raised, but not pointed. We stared at each other. Up close, in daylight, even the dim forest daylight, I could see details I'd missed before. The fur wasn't uniform. It was lighter on the chest and belly, darker on the arms and legs, matted in places with dirt and plant matter. Its face was streaked with what looked like dried blood. Its eyes, those large forward-facing eyes, were half-closed, glazed with pain. It was panting, mouth slightly open. I could see teeth, large, flat molars, sharp canines, but not the fangs of a predator. Something in between. Omnivore teeth. "Jesus," I whispered. The creature's eyes focused on me. It didn't growl, didn't bare its teeth or try to stand. It just watched me with what I can only describe as wary exhaustion. Like it had used up all its options and now it was just waiting to see what I'd do. I lowered the rifle slowly, letting it hang by the sling on my shoulder. "You're hurt," I said. My voice sounded too loud in the forest quiet. "I can see you're hurt." The creature blinked. Once. Slow. Deliberate. I took a step closer, then another. My hands were up, palms out, the universal gesture for "I'm not a threat." It didn't move. Just kept that hand clamped on its shoulder, pressing down. Applying pressure, I realized. It's applying pressure to stop the bleeding, like a person would, like a medic would. That thought hit me like cold water. This thing understood wound care. It understood that pressure stops blood loss. It was treating itself. I took another step. Close enough now that I could smell it fully. The musk was overwhelming, eye-watering, but underneath it was something else. Sweat. The creature was sweating. I could see moisture on its face and the fur around its neck. Fever sweat. "I have a first aid kit," I said, moving slowly to unsling my pack. "In my bag." Medical supplies. I can help. Do you understand? I want to help. The creature watched me kneel down and open my pack. I kept my movements slow, deliberate. Inside, a Forest Service first aid kit. Sterile gauze, medical tape, iodine, antibiotic ointment, elastic bandages, a surgical stapler for closing deep wounds in the field. I'd used it on myself twice, once for a chainsaw cut, once when I'd torn my calf open on barbed wire. I pulled out the kit and held it up so it could see. Medicine, I said, pointing to the red cross on the canvas bag. For wounds. I'm going to come closer now. I need to see what we're dealing with, okay? The creature stared at the first aid kit, then, slowly. And this is the moment I'll remember until the day I die. It nodded, not a human nod. The motion was slight, stiff, probably painful given the shoulder wound, but it was unmistakable. A deliberate up and down motion of the head. Yes, I understand. Proceed. My hand started shaking again, but this time not from fear, from awe, from the sheer impossible weight of what I was witnessing. I moved forward on my knees, closing the distance between us. 5 feet away. 4 feet. 3 feet. Close enough now that I could have reached out and touched it. The smell was overpowering. Musk and infection and something else, something almost sweet. Not pleasant, just organic. The smell of a living thing. I need to see the wound, I said quietly. I need you to move your hand. The creature looked at me for a long moment. Its breathing was ragged, irregular. Then it slowly lifted its hand away from its shoulder. Blood welled up immediately, dark, almost black. Old blood. The wound was a hole, maybe 2 inches in diameter, punched through the muscle of the upper shoulder, through and through. I could see daylight on the other side, or what would have been daylight if the exit wound wasn't packed with dirt and debris. Gunshot, I said, more to myself than to it. Someone shot you. Jesus Christ, someone shot you. I'd seen gunshot wounds before. Elk, deer, 1 black bear that a poacher had wounded and left to die. This was the same. A high-caliber rifle, probably 30-06 or 308. Fired from distance, or the creature wouldn't be alive. But what made my stomach turn was the infection. The edges of the wound were swollen, purple-red with inflammation. Yellow pus mixed with the blood. The smell of rot was coming from here. Tissue dying, bacteria spreading. The wound was at least a week old, maybe more. Without antibiotics, without proper treatment, this thing was going to die of sepsis. And it knew. I could see it in its eyes. It knew it was dying. When? I asked, pointing to the wound, then holding up the fingers. How many days? The creature raised its right hand, the good arm, and held up 7 fingers. Slowly, deliberately, counting them out. 7 days. 7 days since someone had shot it. Since March 3rd, the same day it had returned my jerky. It had been shot, wounded, probably fleeing through the forest trying to survive, and it had still taken the time to return something it had borrowed from me. That realization hit me like a punch to the chest. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. I'm so sorry someone did this to you. I opened the first aid kit and pulled out the iodine, a brown plastic bottle, nearly full. I also grabbed the gauze, tape, and antibiotic ointment. It wasn't enough. This needed a hospital, IV antibiotics, surgical debridement. But it was all I had. This is going to hurt, I said, uncapping the iodine. It's going to hurt bad, but it'll clean the wound, kill the infection. Do you understand? The creature looked at the bottle, then at me. Its face. And I know how insane this sounds, but I swear it's true. Its face showed resignation. That expression you see in people who know pain is coming, but accept it as necessary. It placed its good hand flat against the tree trunk, bracing itself, and closed its eyes. It's giving me permission, I thought. It trusts me. I poured the iodine. The creature made a sound I'd never heard before and hoped to never hear again. It wasn't a roar or a scream. It was a low, guttural groan that came from deep in its chest, a sound of pure agony that it was trying desperately to contain. Its whole body went rigid. The muscles in its arm and shoulder bulged. Its hand dug into the bark of the cedar, fingers gouging into the wood like it was clay. But it didn't pull away. It didn't swipe at me. It just endured. I used the whole bottle. I poured iodine into the entrance wound, watching it foam and bubble as it hit the infected tissue. And then I moved around and poured it into the exit wound on the back of its shoulder. The creature's breathing had gone ragged, almost hyperventilating, but it still didn't move. When the bottle was empty, I grabbed the gauze and started packing the wound. The blood flow had slowed, a good sign. I used almost the entire roll, stuffing sterile cotton into the holes front and back, then wrapping elastic bandage around its shoulder to hold everything in place. It took me 20 minutes. The creature sat perfectly still the entire time, eyes closed, breathing hard but controlled, letting me work. When I tied off the last bandage, I sat back on my heels. "Done," I said. "That's all I can do. The infection, I don't know. You need real medicine, antibiotics. This might not be enough." The creature opened its eyes, looked at its bandaged shoulder, raised its good hand, and touched the gauze gently, carefully, testing it. Then it looked at me, and I saw something in its expression that made my throat tighten. Gratitude. Not the blank appreciation of an animal that's been fed. This was conscious, deliberate thankfulness. The recognition of a debt owed. It was the look you'd give a stranger who'd pulled you out of a burning car. We sat there in the forest, 3 feet apart, man and creature, and something passed between us. Some understanding that transcended species. I wasn't a human and it wasn't a monster. We were just 2 living things, and one had helped the other, and that meant something. The creature reached down to its side, and this is when I noticed it was wearing something. Not clothing exactly, but a pouch, a leather pouch, roughly sewn, hanging from a strip of hide tied around its waist. The leather was crude but functional, tanned hide. Someone had made it. It had made it. It opened the pouch with its good hand and reached inside. Pulled something out, a stone. Smooth, flat river stone. Maybe 4 inches across, oval-shaped, the color of wet slate. It held it up for me to see, turning it in its fingers, and I saw scratches on the surface. Not random scratches. Marks. Deliberate. Lines carved into the stone with something sharp. The creature looked at the stone, then at me, then back at the stone. It held it out. I took it. The stone was cool and heavy in my palm. I looked at the markings. They weren't letters. They weren't pictures. They were coordinates. Lines intersecting at angles, dots placed at specific intervals, some kind of map or notation system. "What is this?" I asked, looking up. The creature brought its hand to its chest, the same gesture it had made at my cabin, palm flat over where its heart would be. Then it pointed at me, then at the stone. "From me to you," it was saying. A gift, payment, reciprocation. I nodded, not trusting my voice. I slipped the stone into my jacket pocket. The creature tried to stand. It pushed itself up against the tree trunk, using its good arm, and managed to get its legs underneath it. Standing, it towered over me, 9 feet at least, maybe more. But there was nothing threatening about it now. It was weakened, hurt, moving carefully. It looked down at me, reached out with its good hand, slowly, telegraphing the movement, and placed it on top of my head. Just rested it there for a moment, the weight of its palm on my skull. The fur was coarse, the skin underneath warm. Then it pulled its hand away, turned, and walked into the forest. I watched it go. watched it disappear between the trees, moving upright, steady despite the wound. Within 30 seconds, I couldn't see it anymore. Couldn't hear it. It had vanished completely, like it had never been there. I sat in the mud next to the cedar tree for a long time, maybe an hour. The rain started up again, light and cold, and I just sat there with my empty first aid kit and the stone in my pocket, trying to process what had happened. I had touched it. I had treated it. I had knelt within arm's reach of something that could have killed me with one swing, and instead it had sat patiently while I bandaged its wounds. It had thanked me. It had given me a gift. This wasn't an animal. This wasn't even close to an animal. This was a person. Different, yes. Non-human, obviously, but a person nonetheless. Intelligent, self-aware, capable of gratitude and trust and complex thought. Capable of choosing to trust when trust would be the hardest thing in the world. Someone had shot it. Some hunter or poacher had seen it in the woods and pulled the trigger without hesitation, the way you'd shoot a bear or an elk. And it had survived. And it had still approached me, a human, same species as its attacker, with nothing but a wounded hope that I might be different. And when I'd helped, it had repaid me with the only thing it had, a stone with markings I didn't understand. I pulled the stone out of my pocket and looked at it again in the grey daylight. The markings were deliberate, careful, carved with precision. This was art. This was writing. Some form of notation, of communication. I needed to understand what it meant. But more than that, much more than that, I needed to protect this thing, because if someone had shot it once, they'd shoot it again. And if word got out that there was something like this in the Olympics, that these creatures were real and intelligent, and here, people wouldn't try to understand. They'd try to capture it, study it, dissect it, turn it into a specimen. I put the stone back in my pocket, gathered up my first aid kit, and started the long hike back to my truck. I didn't file a report that day. I didn't mention the encounter. I drove back to my cabin, made dinner, Dinty Moore beef stew heated on the camp stove, and sat at my table staring at the stone until the lantern ran out of fuel. That night, I dreamed about those eyes. Not the green eye shine of an animal. The awareness behind them, the consciousness that had looked at me and seen not a threat but a potential ally. I dreamed about what it must be like to live in hiding, to exist in a world where your very appearance made you a target, to be alone. When I woke up the next morning, March 11th, I knew two things with absolute certainty. First, I was going to see it again. This wasn't over. Second, whatever happened next, I was going to protect this secret with everything I had. I just didn't know yet what that secret would cost me. 3 days after I treated its wound, the creature came to my cabin. I was sitting at the table on the evening of March the 14th, eating a can of Campbell's chicken noodle soup straight from the pot, when I heard it. 3 knocks on my door. Not scratching, not pawing, knocking. 3 measured raps of knuckles on wood, the way a neighbor would announce themselves. I froze with the spoon halfway to my mouth. Another 3 knocks. Patient. Waiting. I set down the spoon, stood slowly, and approached the door. My Winchester was leaning against the wall, loaded, but I didn't reach for it. Something about those knocks, the deliberateness of them, the politeness, told me I wouldn't need it. I opened the door. The creature stood on my porch, illuminated by the yellow light of my Coleman lantern behind me. It had to hunch to fit under the porch roof overhang. The bandage I'd applied was still wrapped around its shoulder, dirty now, but intact. The creature was holding something in its good hand. A dead rabbit. Freshly killed. Still warm, probably. It looked at me. Extended its arm, offering the rabbit. An exchange. Food for medicine. Payment for services rendered. I took the rabbit. It was limp and heavy in my hands, neck broken cleanly. "Thank you," I said, and my voice cracked on the words. The creature made a sound, a low rumble in its chest that might have been acknowledgement. Then it did something that made my heart stop. It raised one hand and pointed into the forest behind it, pointed deliberately, urgently. Then it brought that hand to its chest and made a cradling motion with both arms, rocking, the universal gesture for holding a child. Then it pointed at me, at the forest, back to itself. "Come with me. Something important. Please." "You want me to follow you?" I asked. It nodded, that same deliberate up and down motion. Now, another nod. I looked at the darkness beyond my porch, at the forest that had swallowed this thing so completely I couldn't track it even when I tried. Every bit of common sense I had screamed that this was insane, that following a 9-foot cryptid into the woods at night was a death sentence. But I thought about how it had sat still while I cleaned its wound, how it had given me a stone with markings I still didn't understand, how it had knocked on my door like a person asking for help. "Okay," I said, "let me get my gear." I grabbed my maglite, my jacket, and, after a moment's hesitation, the Winchester. Not because I didn't trust the creature, because I didn't know what else might be out there. We walked for 2 hours. The creature moved through the forest like water, silent and fluid despite its size. I crashed along behind it, trying to keep up, branches whipping my face, ferns soaking my jeans. My maglite beam bounced crazily in the darkness, catching glimpses of rust-colored fur ahead of me, always just out of reach. It never looked back to check if I was following. It knew I would follow. That trust, that assumption of my commitment, felt heavier than the rifle on my shoulder. We were heading north and west, deeper into the forest, away from any trails or roads. The canopy was so thick I couldn't see the sky. No stars, no moon, just darkness and the narrow cone of my flashlight and the sound of my own breathing, harsh and ragged in my ears. Finally, the creature stopped. We were standing at the base of a rocky outcropping, a small cliff face maybe 30 feet high, covered in moss and ferns. At the base, a cave. Not a large opening, maybe 5 feet high, 4 feet wide, dark as a throat. The creature turned to look at me. In the beam of my flashlight, its eyes reflected that eerie green. It pointed at the cave. Then it placed one hand over its heart and made that cradling motion again. Inside. Someone inside. Someone important. Then it made a different gesture, fingers to its lips, then spreading them outward. Quiet. Silence. Secret. I nodded. I understand. I won't tell anyone. The creature studied me for a long moment. Then it turned and ducked into the cave, moving sideways to fit through the opening. I followed. The smell hit me first, that same musk, but concentrated. This was a den, a living space. The cave opened up past the entrance into a chamber maybe 15 feet across. My flashlight beam swept the space, packed earth floor, walls of stone, and in the back corner, 2 bodies. I made a sound. Something between a gasp and a sob, and almost dropped the flashlight. One was another creature, smaller than the one I'd been following, maybe 7 feet tall, more slender build, with darker fur. A female, I thought, though I had no real basis for that. Assumption beyond proportion. She was lying on her side, one arm outstretched, and I could see the wound even from the entrance. A gunshot to the back, between the shoulder blades. The blood had dried black against her fur, clinging to her, pressed against her chest, arms wrapped around her, was a juvenile. A child, maybe 3 feet tall, covered in light brown fur that looked almost downy, like baby hair. Its face was buried against the female's chest, and as my light hit it, it made a sound, a high, keening whine that raised every hair on my neck. It was crying, mourning. The male, the one I'd been following, moved past me into the cave and knelt beside the bodies. It placed one hand on the female's head, smoothing her fur back gently, tenderly. Then it made a sound I'll never forget. A low, mournful howl that started in its chest and rose in pitch until it sounded almost human, almost like a word, almost like, no, it wasn't a sound an animal would make. It was grief. Pure, conscious, human grief. The sound of someone who had lost everything and didn't understand why. I stood there in the entrance, rifle hanging forgotten at my side, flashlight beam trembling in my shaking hand, and I wept. I couldn't help it. Tears ran down my face, and I made no attempt to stop them. The juvenile had turned at the sound, at the male's cry, and now it was looking at me. Its face was so young, eyes too large for its head, still that forward-facing predator arrangement, but filled with confusion and terror. It made a small sound. Not aggressive, just frightened. It didn't understand who I was or why I was here. The male reached out and touched the juvenile's head, made a soft rumbling sound, reassurance, and then looked back at me. In the flashlight beam, I could see wetness on its face. It was crying, too, not making sound now, just tears running through the fur. It pointed at the female, then at itself, then at the juvenile. Family, my family. Dead. Please, help. I understood. It wanted me to help bury them, to treat them with dignity, to acknowledge that they had existed, that they had mattered. I'll help, I said, my voice thick. Of course I'll help. We spent the next 3 hours digging. I used a folding shovel from my pack. The male used its hands, scooping earth and rock with a strength that seemed impossible. We dug a grave 30 feet from the cave entrance, in a small clearing where the forest floor was soft. Deep enough that scavengers wouldn't find them. When it was done, the male carried the female, cradled her in its arms like she weighed nothing, even though she must have been 500 pounds. It laid her in the grave gently, positioned her on her back with her arms folded across her chest. Then it climbed out and reached for the juvenile. The young one didn't want to let go. It clung to the male's arm, making that keening sound again, and the male had to pry its fingers loose one by one. When it finally pulled the juvenile away, the little one thrashed and screamed, a sound so human it made my chest ache. The male held it tight, wrapped both arms around it, and pressed its face against the juvenile's head, rocking, comforting, the same motion it had shown me earlier. Child. After a few minutes, the juvenile went quiet, still trembling but no longer fighting. We filled in the grave together. When it was done, the male gathered stones, river rocks, smooth and gray, and arranged them in a circle on top of the mound. Not randomly, deliberately. Some kind of marker, some kind of memorial. Then it knelt beside the grave and placed both hands flat on the earth, bowed its head. I don't know if it was praying, but it looked like prayer. It looked like grief made physical. I stood back, giving it space, and that's when I noticed something on the ground, near my feet, scratch marks in the dirt. Fresh ones, deliberate lines. I knelt down and looked closer. They were letters. English letters. Crude but readable, scratched into the earth with a claw or finger. Why one word? 3 letters, a question that contained universes. Why did this happen? Why did they shoot her? Why do you hunt us? Why can't we live in peace? I looked up at the male. It was watching me, waiting for an answer. It knew I couldn't give. I don't know, I said, and my voice broke. I don't know why people do these things. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The creature stared at me for a long time. Then it reached down and scratched another word into the dirt beneath the first. Always. It pointed at the word, then at the grave, then swept its arm in a wide arc, encompassing the forest, the world beyond. Always. This always happens. This is what humans do. I wanted to argue, wanted to say not all humans, not me. I would never. But the words died in my throat because I knew they were true. Someone had shot this female for no reason except that she existed. Someone had left her to die, leaving her child orphaned and her mate devastated. And that someone was human, like me. "What are you?" I asked quietly. "Where did you come from? Why are you here?" The creature looked at me. Then slowly it reached out and placed one finger in the dirt. Started scratching. I aimed my flashlight at the ground, watching letters form. Old. Then beneath it, before you. "You were here before humans?" I asked. It shook its head, scratched again. "Before you forgot." That didn't make sense. "I don't understand." The creature made a frustrated sound, the first time I'd heard anything like anger from it. It scratched more letters, faster now, carving them deep into the earth. "You killed everything we were sent to watch, to wait to report." I stared at the words. Read them again. "Report? Report to who?" The creature pointed up. Not at the sky. We couldn't see the sky through the canopy, but the gesture was clear. Up, beyond, out there. My blood went cold. "Are you saying you're not from Earth?" It scratched one more word. "Made." Then it pointed at itself, at the grave, at the direction where I assumed other members of its species might be. We were made, created, placed here. By who? My voice was barely a whisper. "Who made you? Who sent you?" The creature shook its head. The gesture was clearly no, or I can't tell you, or you're not ready to know. It stood up, brushing dirt from its hands, and looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Then it picked up the juvenile, who had been sitting quietly through all of this, watching with those two large eyes, and turned to leave. "Wait," I said. "I need to understand. I need to know what this means." The creature stopped, turned back, looked at me for a long moment, and I could see it making a decision, weighing something. Then it made a gesture. "Follow." We walked for another hour. The juvenile rode on the male's shoulders, arms wrapped around its neck, silent now, in shock, maybe, or just exhausted from grief. I had no idea where we were anymore, miles from any trail, deep in old-growth territory that maybe no human had ever walked before. The canopy was so thick it was like walking through a tunnel, my flashlight the only illumination in a world of absolute darkness. Finally, we came to a clearing. Small, maybe 50 feet across, ringed by massive Sitka spruce, and in the center, structures. Not buildings, not exactly, but structures. Lean-tos made of woven branches and bark, stone rings for fires, drying racks made of lashed poles, a water collection system, cedar bark troughs angled to catch rain and funnel it into carved wooden bowls. A settlement, a village, and there were others. I counted 6 more of them. Different sizes, all watching me from the shadows at the edge of the clearing, eyes reflecting green in my flashlight beam. The male set the juvenile down and gestured for me to wait. Then it moved to the center of the clearing and made a series of sounds, low rumbles, grunts, something that might have been words in a language I didn't understand. The others responded, a conversation, a debate. After several minutes, one of them approached me. Older, I thought. Its fur was grayed around the muzzle, its movements slower. 8 feet tall, massive across the shoulders. It carried something in its hands. A flat piece of bark, maybe 2 feet square, and a charred stick. Charcoal. It knelt in front of me and placed the bark on the ground. Looked at me expectantly. I understood. It wanted to communicate, to show me something. The old one took the charcoal and began to draw on the bark. I knelt across from it, my flashlight positioned so we could both see. It drew a circle, large, taking up most of the bark. Then it drew smaller circles inside it, 7 of them, arranged in a pattern I recognized, the solar system. Sun in the center, planets around it. It pointed at the 3rd circle from the center, Earth, and tapped it twice with the charcoal. Here, this is where we are. Then it drew something outside the large circle, another shape. Not a circle, more like a triangle, or a pyramid. It drew lines from this shape to earth. Arrows. Direction of travel. They came from there, it was saying. Something came to earth. It drew stick figures on earth. Lots of them. Then it scribbled through half of them, crossing them out, erasing them. Many became few. Then it drew larger stick figures, taller, broader, different from the first ones. It drew these new figures standing over the first ones, watching. One of the large figures had lines coming from its head. A crown, maybe, or antennae, or something else. The old one pointed at itself, at the other creatures in the clearing, then tapped the drawing of the large figures. Us. We are these. Then it took the charcoal and wrote words, the same crude letters I'd seen before. 12,000 years. Watchers, guardians, you almost ended. It circled the stick figures that had been crossed out, then drew flames around them. Fire. Destruction. We stopped you. They made us stop you. My mind was reeling. You're saying 12,000 years ago, humanity nearly destroyed itself, and someone, created you to watch us, to keep us from doing it again? The old one nodded. Drew more. Symbols I didn't recognize. Then words again. When you build weapons. We report when you reach for stars. We report. You are being tested. You are failing. It drew a line from the pyramid shape outside the solar system, down to Earth, but this time it added something new. Smaller triangles. A fleet. Multiple craft. When you fail, they will come, they will erase, they will start over. I sat back on my heels, the flashlight shaking in my hands. Are you telling me we're, what, some kind of experiment? That we're being watched? That if we don't pass some test, we'll be wiped out? The old one set down the charcoal, placed one hand flat over its heart, then extended it toward me, a gesture of truth, of sincerity. Then it wrote one final phrase. You are not free. You never were. The clearing was silent except for the sound of rain beginning to fall again, pattering on the leaves overhead. All the creatures were watching me now, waiting, measuring my reaction. I felt something inside me crack, some fundamental assumption about reality, about humanity's place in the universe, about the nature of existence itself. We weren't alone. We'd never been alone, and worse, we weren't independent. We were children being monitored by babysitters who answered to parents we'd never met. Roswell, I heard myself say. 1947, the crash. Was that? The old one nodded, wrote, warning you came too close, sent message you ignored. How many times? I asked. How many times have they sent warnings? The creature held up both hands, fingers spread. 10. Then it raised them again, and again. And again. 30 times. 40. Every nuclear test. Every rocket. Every satellite we tell them, they send warnings. Your governments know they hide it. Why? My voice was barely audible. Why hide you? Why not tell people? The creature pointed at the gravesite, somewhere out there in the darkness. Then it gestured to itself. To the others, it made a motion like a gun being fired. Bang. If people know we exist, they will hunt us. If they hunt us, they will learn truth. Governments protect secret, not to protect you, to protect themselves. I understood. If the public knew that Sasquatch were real, someone would eventually capture one. Study it, learn to communicate with it, and then the truth would come out. That we're not free, that we're being watched, that every attempt to reach beyond our cradle is being reported to entities that see us as a potential threat. The panic that would cause, the collapse of governments, the religious implications, the existential terror. Better to keep it buried, better to make sure the watchers stayed hidden, no matter what it took. The government kills you, I said slowly. When they find you, they interrogate you, and then they kill you. To keep the secret. The old one nodded, wrote, "Many have died. We avoid humans. We hide. We wait. We hope you change." "And if we don't?" I asked. "If we keep building weapons, keep trying to expand, keep failing this test, what happens?" The creature looked at me with ancient, tired eyes that had seen things I couldn't imagine. It wrote one final sentence on the bark, the letters large and deliberate. "They will come before you spread the disease." Then it stood, took the piece of bark, and threw it into the fire ring in the center of the clearing. The charcoal drawings curled and blackened, turning to ash, evidence erased. The old one looked at me and made a gesture. "Go. Leave. Forget." But I couldn't forget. I would never forget. The male who had brought me here, my wounded friend, approached. The juvenile was clinging to its leg now, hiding behind it, peeking out at me with frightened eyes. The male placed one hand on my shoulder, heavy, warm, and looked into my eyes. Then it pointed at me, at the forest in the direction of my cabin, and made a pushing motion. "Go home. This is all you can know. Please keep our secret." "I won't tell anyone," I said. "I promise." It nodded. Then it did something that broke me. It picked up the juvenile and guided the little one's hand into a wave, teaching it to say goodbye to me. The small hand, almost human in proportion, waved uncertainly. I waved back, tears streaming down my face. Then they melted into the darkness, and I was alone in the clearing with the dying fire and the weight of knowledge I never wanted. I found my way back to the cabin as dawn was breaking. March 15th. The sun rising over the Olympics, painting the clouds gold and pink. A beautiful morning. The start of another normal day. Except nothing would ever be normal again. I sat at my table, staring at the stone in my hands, the one the creature had given me days before. The markings that I'd thought were random now made a horrible kind of sense. Coordinates, dates, numbers, reports. This was a piece of their documentation, their record-keeping, evidence of their purpose. I was holding proof that we were being watched, and in 3 days none of it would matter. Because in 3 days, my supervisor would call me on the radio and give me coordinates to a logging road off Highway 101. In 3 days, I would meet FBI Special Agent Thomas Carver. In 3 days, I would watch them drag my friend into a concrete room beneath Mount Weather, chain it to a table, and force it to write the truth about humanity in plain English. And in 3 days, I would learn that knowing a secret is one thing, but being forced to keep it is something else entirely. The call came 3 days later, on March 17th, at 13:47 hours. I was cutting a fallen hemlock off Forest Road 2270 when the radio crackled to life. My supervisor's voice, distorted by static. "Keynote 7, this is Base. Come in." I set down the chainsaw, pulled off my work gloves, and grabbed the handset. "Keynote 7, go ahead." "Rob, I need you to report to a location immediately. Government business. They requested you specifically." My stomach dropped. Requested me? For what? Didn't say. Just gave me coordinates and said you need to be there within the hour. "Bring your service weapon and your badge. This is official." He read me the coordinates. I wrote them down on a scrap of paper with hands that had started shaking. Highway 101, 14 miles south of Lake Quinault. A logging access road I knew well. It led deep into restricted territory. "Copy that," I said. "En route." "Rob?" My supervisor's voice softened. "Whatever this is, be careful." The line went dead. I loaded my gear into the truck with mechanical precision, my mind racing. They know. Someone saw something. Someone talked. This is about the creatures. I thought about my friend with the wounded shoulder, about the juvenile clinging to its leg, about the old one drawing pictures in charcoal, revealing truths that were never meant to be spoken aloud. I promised I wouldn't tell anyone. I kept that promise, but maybe someone else hadn't. I reached the coordinates at 14:42 hours. The logging road was blocked by vehicles. 6 black Chevrolet Suburbans, government plates, arranged in a semicircle. Men in dark suits stood beside them, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. One of them flagged me down. I stopped my truck 20 feet back, rolled down my window. The man approached, late 40s, gray at the temples, the kind of face that had seen things and chosen to forget them. He pulled out a leather wallet and flipped it open. FBI badge, gold shield. Officer Thorne, that's me. Special Agent Thomas Carver. I need you to come with us. Leave your vehicle here. What's this about? I'll explain en route. Right now, I need you to surrender your service weapon and radio and get in the vehicle. His tone left no room for argument. I looked past him at the other men. They weren't just FBI. Some had different badges, agencies I didn't recognize. One of them was standing next to what looked like a refrigerated truck, the kind used for transporting game meat or bodies. My mouth went dry. Am I under arrest? No, but you are being temporarily detained under the authority of the National Security Act. You'll be compensated for your time and cooperation. He gestured to the nearest Suburban. Please, Officer Thorne, we don't have time for questions. I had a choice. I could refuse, demand a lawyer, drive away. But I thought about the clearing in the forest, the settlement, the families. If I ran, if I resisted, they'd wonder why. They'd investigate. They'd find them. So I got out of my truck, handed over my Winchester and my Motorola, and climbed into the back of the Suburban. We drove for 6 hours. They'd put a hood over my head after the first 30 minutes. Black canvas, smelling of sweat and fear from whoever had worn it before me. I tried to track our direction by the turns and the sound of the road beneath the tires, but eventually I lost count. No one spoke. When I asked questions, they were ignored. The only information I got was from Agent Carver, who sat beside me in the back seat. At one point, maybe 3 hours in, he said quietly, "You've had contact with one of them. Multiple contacts. We've been monitoring your sector. Thermal signatures, unusual activity patterns. We know you helped one. Treated a gunshot wound on March 10th. My blood turned to ice. How? We have ways. Satellites, motion sensors in certain territories. We've been tracking this particular group for 18 months. He paused. The female was killed by a poacher we've already dealt with, but we've been trying to make contact with the male for weeks. It won't communicate with us. It becomes aggressive when we approach, but our analysts believe it might communicate with you. Why me? Because you showed it kindness. Because you didn't shoot it when you had the chance. Because you're the only human it's ever trusted. He shifted in his seat. We need you to make it talk, Officer Thorne. We need to know what they know, what they've seen, what they're reporting. Reporting to who? He didn't answer. When they finally removed the hood, we were underground. I was standing in a hallway painted institutional green, fluorescent lights humming overhead, the air cold and recycled. Concrete walls, no windows, the smell of disinfectant and something else. Ozone, like the air before a lightning strike. Where are we? Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center, Agent Carver said. Bluemont, Virginia. This facility doesn't officially exist. You were never here. Do you understand? I nodded numbly. We were 4 levels down, he told me. Behind us was a blast door thick enough to survive a nuclear strike. Ahead was a corridor with doors on either side, each marked with alphanumeric codes. No names, no descriptions, just numbers. We stopped at a door marked, Restricted, Level 5. Clearance only. Agent Carver pressed his hand against a scanner. The door clicked open. Wait here, he said. I stood in the hallway for 10 minutes, surrounded by men who wouldn't look at me, and tried to keep my breathing steady. Tried not to think about what was behind that door. Then Agent Carver emerged. His face was pale, and there was sweat on his upper lip despite the cold. "It's in there," he said. "Chained to a table. It won't respond to us, won't write, won't gesture, nothing." But when I showed it your photograph, he paused, swallowing hard. "It reacted, became agitated, started making sounds. I think it recognized you. You chained it. It's 9 feet tall and strong enough to rip a man in half. Yes, we chained it." He handed me a legal pad and a pen. "Make it talk. Make it right. We need to know what it is, where it came from, and what the hell it's been doing in our forests." "And if it won't?" Agent Carver looked at me with hollow eyes. "Then we'll try less pleasant methods. And trust me, Officer Thorne, you don't want that, for its sake or yours." He opened the door. The room was concrete, 20 feet square, no windows, one large mirror on the wall that I knew was two-way glass. A steel table in the center, bolted to the floor. And chained to that table, wrists bound with restraints that looked designed for large animals, was my friend. The creature that had knocked on my cabin door, that had led me to its family's grave, that had waved goodbye with a juvenile hiding behind its leg. It was slumped forward, head down, breathing slow and heavy. The bandage on its shoulder was gone. The wound had healed, badly. Scar tissue, thick and ropey. They'd kept it alive, but they hadn't treated it kindly. When I entered, its head lifted. Our eyes met, and I saw recognition, relief, hope, then despair, because it understood I hadn't come to rescue it. I'd been brought here to betray it. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." Agent Carver entered behind me, followed by another man, younger, nervous, constantly adjusting his tie. "This is Agent Milhouse. He'll be observing. Sit down, Officer Thorne. Begin the interview." I sat across from the creature. The table between us was cold metal. I placed the legal pad and pen in the center, within reach of its chained hands. "Can you write?" I asked quietly. "Can you tell them what they want to know?" The creature stared at me. Then slowly it reached for the pen, picked it up with surprising delicacy. Thumb and forefinger, the way a human would hold it, positioned the tip over the paper. Agent Carver leaned forward. "Ask it what it is, where it's from, how many there are." I ignored him. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" The creature wrote, letters large and deliberate. "They shot me again, leg, I cannot run." I looked at its leg under the table. Bandaged, blood seeping through, fresh wound. "Jesus Christ, you shot it?" "It tried to escape during transport," Carver said coldly. "Standard protocol." I turned back to the creature. "I want to help you, but I need you to answer their questions. Please, if you cooperate, maybe they'll let you go." Even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. The creature knew it too. I could see it in its eyes. But it wrote anyway. "We are the Watchers. We were placed here 12,000 years ago after your species nearly destroyed itself the first time." Agent Carver's hand clamped on my shoulder. "What the hell does that mean? First time?" "Let it finish," I said. The creature continued writing, filling page after page. "We report to those who made us. You are not ready to know you are not alone. You will try to find them. You will fail, and they will sterilize this planet before you spread." Carver was reading over my shoulder now. I heard his breathing quicken. "This is insane. This is—" He grabbed the legal pad. "What do you mean, sterilize? Explain. Who will sterilize?" The creature looked at him with something like pity. Then it wrote, "Roswell was not first contact, it was a warning. We are your probation officers. Every nuclear test, every satellite launch, every attempt to reach beyond. We report you are being evaluated. You are failing." Agent Milhouse made a sound, a strangled gasp. His face had gone white. Carver read the words again, his lips moving silently, and then he shoved back from the table and left the room without a word. I could hear him through the door, vomiting, violent, wrenching sounds. Agent Milhouse stayed, but he'd backed against the wall, as far from the table as possible. "This can't be real. This can't be—" The creature was still writing. "Every government knows, every major power has been told. They keep secret to maintain control. If people knew, if they understood, you are not free. There would be chaos." "How many times?" I asked. "How many times have they warned us?" The creature wrote numbers, dates: 1947, 1952, 1965, 1979, 1980, 1982. Events I vaguely remembered: UFO sightings, military incidents, things explained away as weather balloons or mass hysteria. "Each time you come closer to the line, each time we tell them, they send warnings. Your leaders ignore. They believe they can win. They cannot." The door opened. A new man entered. Not FBI, no badge at all, just a charcoal gray suit, expensive, tailored, hair slicked back, eyes like chips of ice. He looked at the legal pad, read what was written there, and his expression didn't change. "Terminate it," he said. His voice was flat, administrative, like he was ordering lunch. "Sir," Agent Milhouse started. "I said terminate, incinerate the body. Class 5 sanitization protocol, these two as well." He pointed at me and Milhouse. "They've been exposed." "We had an agreement," I shouted, standing. "I cooperated. You said—" The man in the charcoal suit looked at me for the first time. "You were never going to leave this facility alive, Officer Thorne. Neither was it. This conversation never happened. These entities don't exist, and the information they possess dies with them." The creature was writing furiously now, filling the page. "They will kill me. They will kill you if you speak. They know what we told the others in 1952 and 1979. This is why you dream of stars, but cannot leave your cradle." Two men in biohazard suits entered, carrying a metal case. They opened it, removed a syringe filled with clear liquid. The creature watched them approach and didn't resist, didn't struggle, just kept writing. "When you finally meet them, they will ask why we failed to stop you. I will tell them, because some of you were worth saving." They injected it in the neck. The creature's hand spasmed. The pen rolled off the table, clattering on the concrete floor. "No!" I lunged forward, but hands grabbed me. Milhouse and another agent holding me back. The creature's eyes found mine, held them, and in those final seconds before the light faded, I saw forgiveness, understanding, not anger, not hatred, just acceptance. It slumped forward, chains rattling, and was still. "Clean this up," the man said. "Fire crew on standby. I want nothing left but ash." Then he turned to me. "You will sign a non-disclosure agreement with a classification level that requires congressional approval to override. You will accept a financial settlement and immediate retirement from federal service. You will never speak of this to anyone, including your wife, your family, or a priest. If you break silence, you will disappear. Your family will disappear. Do you understand?" I understood. I understood perfectly. They gave me a check for $50,000, made me sign documents I barely read, put the hood back over my head and drove me back to Washington, depositing me at my truck on that logging road just after midnight on March 18th. My supervisor called the next morning and told me I'd been selected for early retirement. Full pension, effective immediately. There was a position waiting for me in Alaska if I wanted it, a promotion even. I declined. They accepted my resignation within an hour. For 42 years, I've lived with what I saw in that room. I tried to find the others, the people who'd been there. Agent Carver's obituary appeared in the Washington Post on April 9, 1983. Died suddenly at age 48. Survived by his wife and 2 children. Memorial service private. The official cause was listed as a heart attack, but I called his precinct, pretending to be a cousin. The officer I spoke to let slip, after a few drinks over the phone, he was already drunk at 2 p.m., that Carver had eaten his gun in a Motel 6 outside Bethesda. Single shot to the head, left a note that said only, "I'm sorry, I can't know this." Agent Milhouse died in a hiking accident in 1984. Fell off a cliff in Shenandoah National Park, alone. No witnesses. His autopsy report listed alcohol in his system, but his wife told reporters he'd been sober for 3 years. The technicians, the guards, everyone who'd been in that facility during those 3 days, I tracked them as best I could over the years. Dead within 5 years. Car accidents, suicides, sudden illnesses, house fires. Everyone except me and the man in the charcoal suit. I never saw him again, never learned his name, never found a trace of him in any database or directory. He's out there somewhere, still keeping the secret. My marriage ended in 1987. Linda left me because I wasn't present, because I'd wake up screaming from nightmares, because I'd stare at the woods for hours, searching for movement, because I'd started drinking a fifth of Jack Daniels every night, just to sleep. She remarried in 1989, had 2 kids, the family we'd wanted. I wasn't invited to the wedding. My daughter was born in 1986, 3 years after Mount Weather. I named her Sarah. She looked like Linda, blonde hair, blue eyes, smile that could light up a room. I tried to be a good father, but how do you be present when half your mind is trapped in a concrete room watching something innocent die because it told the truth? Sarah stopped talking to me after I missed her college graduation in 2008. I'd gotten drunk the night before, couldn't fly, couldn't face the crowds. She sent me one email. "I needed you there. You weren't. I'm done." I don't blame her. I've been followed my entire adult life. Cars that stay 3 vehicles back on the highway, men in coffee shops who read newspapers but never turn the page. Clicks on my phone line, mail opened and resealed. For decades I was too afraid to speak. Too afraid they'd make good on their threat. But then last July, Dr. Patterson at Sacred Heart told me I had 6 months. Stage 4 cancer, metastasized, inoperable. Nothing to be done but manage pain. And I realized they can't touch me anymore. I'm already dying. It's December 1st, 2025 now. 42 years, 8 months, and 14 days since I watched them kill my friend. I'm 67 years old. I weigh 142 pounds, down from 190. The cancer has eaten me hollow. I take OxyContin every 4 hours just to breathe without screaming. Dr. Patterson says I have weeks now, not months. I live alone in this apartment above a pawn shop. My only companion is a gray tabby cat named Smoke that showed up on my fire escape 2 years ago. He sits on my lap while I write this, purring, oblivious to the weight of what I'm recording. I don't have friends. I don't have family who speaks to me. I don't have anything except this story and the stone, that river stone with markings I still don't fully understand, hidden in a safety deposit box at a bank in Spokane. Proof that I'm not insane, that it happened. I'm telling you this now because someone needs to know, because the secret has been killing me slower than the cancer, eating away at my soul 1 day at a time. Because every time I see a news report about satellite launches or space telescopes or plans to colonize Mars, I think about what the creature wrote. You are being evaluated. You are failing. We think we're alone. We think we're reaching for the stars as explorers, as pioneers. We think the universe is ours to inherit. We're wrong. We're children being watched by babysitters who report to parents we've never met. Every rocket we launch, every weapon we build, every border we fight over, every species we drive extinct, someone is taking notes, making a file, building a case. And when we finally cross whatever line they've drawn, when we prove beyond doubt that we're too dangerous to let off this planet, they won't negotiate. They won't give us a second chance. They'll sterilize us, wipe the slate clean, start over, maybe with something better. Something that doesn't kill its own kind over resources and religion. Something that doesn't hunt the ones sent to guard them. Something that can look at the stars without immediately thinking of ways to weaponize the distance. The creatures in the Olympics, the Watchers, the Sasquatch, whatever you want to call them, they're still out there. Fewer now, I think. The poaching has gotten worse. The forest is smaller. Their hiding places are shrinking, but they're there, in the deep woods, in the places humans rarely go, keeping their vigil, watching us, reporting, hoping maybe that we'll prove them wrong, that we'll change. I don't think we will. I've spent 42 years watching humanity, and I've seen us get worse, not better. More weapons, more wars, more hatred, more destruction. We're accelerating toward the line, and we can't see it because we don't believe it exists. The government knows. Every major government knows. They've been told. They've seen the evidence. They've had encounters they can't explain away, and they've made a choice. Keep the secret. Maintain control. Keep building weapons. Keep reaching for space. Keep pretending we're in charge of our own destiny. They're gambling that they can win. That they can meet the entities that made the Watchers and somehow fight them off. That human ingenuity and nuclear weapons can defeat something advanced enough to create an entirely new species and place them on Earth 12,000 years ago. They're wrong. And when they lose, we all lose. I don't know if I was worth saving. The creature wrote that some of us were, but I don't know if I made the cut. I betrayed it. I led the FBI to its people, even if I didn't mean to. I sat in that room and watched it die and did nothing. I kept the secret for 42 years because I was afraid, because I wanted to live, because I was weak. But I'm telling you now because I'm dying anyway, and because someone needs to hear the truth. We are not alone. We never have been, and we are not free. The woods hold secrets. The government buries them. And the Watchers, those sad, ancient, patient things that smell like musk and rot in hospitals, they're still out there, doing their job, protecting us from the truth that would break us, reporting our failures to entities that will one day decide we've failed too many times. If you see one in the woods, if you're ever lucky or cursed enough to encounter something that walks upright, that watches you with intelligent eyes, that seems impossibly human and impossibly not, don't try to capture it. Don't try to prove it exists. Don't take photos or call the authorities. Just leave it an offering, food, water, something to show respect, and walk away, because they're not hiding from us. They're protecting us from the truth, from our own arrogance, from the knowledge that would shatter everything we believe about our place in the universe. And when you look up at the stars at night, remember, something up there is looking back, taking notes, measuring our worth, deciding whether we deserve to join them or whether we need to be erased before we spread our disease to the rest of the cosmos. I don't know when they'll come. Maybe tomorrow, maybe in 100 years, maybe in 10,000, but they will come. And when they do, we won't be greeting visitors. We'll be answering to landlords, explaining why we failed to live up to whatever standard they set, justifying our existence. And I don't think we'll have a good answer. The stone is in the safety deposit box at Washington Trust Bank, 452 West Riverside Avenue, Spokane. Box 1847. The key is taped under the bottom drawer of my dresser. If you're reading this after I'm gone, and you probably are, you can find it. Study it. Maybe you're smarter than me. Maybe you can decode the markings. Maybe you can understand what they were trying to tell us. Or maybe it's better if you don't. Maybe the secret should die with me. But I'm leaving the choice to you. Because I've learned that secrets are like cancer. They grow in the dark, feeding on silence, killing you slowly from the inside. And maybe, just maybe, if enough people know the truth, we'll finally start taking the test seriously. Start changing. Start proving we're worth saving. Or maybe we won't. Maybe we'll keep doing what we've always done. Killing each other, destroying our world, reaching for the stars with weapons in our hands and hatred in our hearts. Either way, I won't be here to see it. The OxyContin is running out. Dr. Patterson says hospice is the next step. I've declined. When it gets too bad, when the pain becomes too much, I have a bottle of sleeping pills in my cabinet. Enough for a peaceful exit. I'll die in my bed, with smoke purring on my chest, looking out the window at the gray December sky. And maybe, Just maybe, I'll see them again. My friend with the wounded shoulder, the old one who drew pictures in charcoal, the juvenile with frightened eyes learning to wave goodbye. Maybe they'll forgive me for failing them. Maybe they'll understand I was just as trapped as they were, just in a different kind of cage. My name is Robert William Thorne. I am 67 years old. In March of 1983, I watched the FBI interrogate a Sasquatch in a concrete room beneath Mount Weather, and what it told us should have changed everything. But we kept the secret. We always keep the secret. And one day, that choice will destroy us all. This is my confession. This is my warning. This is my last chance to tell the truth. Make of it what you will. Final entry, December 15th, 2025. Hospice came today. I sent them away. It's almost time. Smoke is on my lap. The sun is setting. The sky is the color of rust, the same color as the creature's fur. I can still smell it sometimes. Musk and rot and copper, a phantom scent that follows me. Or maybe it's real. Maybe they're close, watching, waiting. I hope I was worth saving. I hope someone reads this and understands. I hope... Editor's note. Robert William Thorne was found deceased in his apartment on December 18th, 2020. Cause of death, intentional overdose. This manuscript was discovered on his laptop, along with 847 pages of additional notes, sketches, and timelines. The safety deposit box referenced in the text was opened by his attorney and found to contain a smooth river stone with markings that have been analyzed by 3 independent linguistic experts. None could identify the writing system. The stone currently resides in a private collection. Mr. Thorne's ex-wife and daughter declined to comment for this publication. The following video recording was found on Mr. Thorne's phone, dated December 17th, 2025, 11:47 p.m. Shaky phone camera footage. Robert Thorne, gaunt and gray, speaking directly to the camera. His voice is weak but steady. If you're watching this, I'm gone. And I need to tell you one more thing. Something I couldn't write down. Something I was too afraid to admit even to myself. 3 nights ago, I heard knocking on my window. 3 knocks, measured, deliberate. I looked out and saw eyes, green eyes, reflecting the streetlight, watching me. They know I'm dying. They know I'm talking, and they came to say goodbye. Or maybe to say thank you. For trying, for caring, for remembering that they existed even when everyone else wanted to forget. I left a can of tuna on the fire escape. In the morning, it was gone. They're still here, still watching, still waiting for us to change. Don't let them wait forever.